Welcome to the Epic Company Culture Podcast, where your host, Josh Sweeney, will give you, the business leaders, HR professionals, and company culture aficionados, the knowledge you need to take your company culture to the next level.
Hi, my name is Josh Sweeney, and welcome to the Epic Company Culture Podcast. Before we get started, I would like to thank Prototype Prime. Prototype Prime is a technology co-working space in Peachtree Corners, Georgia, and they have been so gracious as to give us this amazing podcast room to bring this content to you. So thank you. Today's episode is another culture question episode. So just as a quick recap, if you didn't hear the last episode on culture interviewing questions, a culture interview question is something that we ask during the hiring process to see if this person has a similar culture or values to our organization. So in this one, our question is, what was the last book you read? When did you read it? And why did you choose it? Now, this is not just an example question. This is a question I've been using for about the past 10 years. So I used it in Atcore Systems, and I continue to use it at Epic Culture, mainly because it is part of our company culture. Why is it part of our company culture? Well, as the founder, I get to set a lot of the company culture. And what we generally find is that is the case for any entrepreneur-led organization. There is a lot of that person's culture injected into the vibe of that company. And when it comes to myself, many, many years ago, I was reading a book. Can't recall the author. It was a very famous sales trainer that's eluding me right now. But he basically stated that radio is bubble gum for the ears, right? You should build a university on wheels. Anytime you get in the car, you can choose two paths, right? You can, and I'm adding a little bit of this here, but you can basically choose two paths. The first one is you can listen to the same song that you've heard 1,000 times and waste your life away, or you can get educated. You can read or listen to a nonfiction. You can listen to fiction. You can do whatever you'd like to in that realm. But the ultimate outcome would be to listen to nonfiction and continuously educate yourself. So I would say somewhere around 10, 12, 13 years ago, I turned my car into the university on wheels, and I started downloading audiobooks and buying Audible and listening to podcasts and anything else that I could do. Now, the odd thing is you will find if you try this out that the one day that you don't have content and you don't play that podcast or audiobook, surely enough, that same song you heard 3 months ago will be the first one to come on. And I don't know about you guys, but I only need to hear the same T Swift song, once or twice in my life, and I'm good to move on to some educational items. So the reason that I ask about the company culture, or this company culture question, what was the last book you read, is because one, if I'm going to constantly educate myself in a role, and then I want other people that are going to constantly do the same. If I have a salesperson that's coming on board and has never read a sales book, then, as far as I'm concerned, they're not really a sales expert. They've been winging it, right? They're not getting new ideas. If they are an audio-visual expert and they haven't read anything on AV, don't listen to podcasts and haven't educated themselves even further on the latest and greatest, then they're not really an expert. They may still be very good at their role. They may be great at their job, whatever it might be. But I want to know that the people that I'm hiring are continuously educating themselves in the areas that we are experts in and that they are experts in. So I asked them, what was the last book that they read? Now, as far as good and bad answers, well, I've gotten some whoppers on the bad side. Just short of I don't read. That's generally not a good one. There's a lot of people who just haven't read anything nonfiction or anything since college. And the further ago that was, the worse that answer is. If you're still in college, then it's not such a bad answer. I get it. You're very busy. You have lots of textbooks to get through. If college was 10 years ago, well, that's not such a valid answer. The best answer, the cream of the crop, would be that you just finished a book within the last 30 days that's nonfiction and is related to your area of study or what you are an expert in, effectively your job role. So that'd be the top answer. And then you have the when and the why. So the when, again, we talked about, the timing of that. How many years ago was it, or was it much more recent? We want to see a pattern. I want to know in our organization that when I go read a book that overcomes an issue that we're having, that I can hand that to somebody on my team and say, I want to try and implement this. And I want to know that they're going to take that back and knock that book out. They're going to come to us and say, I have ideas now that I read it. I see what you want, and let's do it. The alternative, and what I've seen in the past, is you hand them a book and it sits on their desk for about 6 months until you look at them and go, are you going to read that, or do I need to collaborate with somebody else on the team for this? And I typically find that people are generally heavy on the continuing education or extremely light to non-existent on the continuing education. They read or they don't. Now, this isn't to say that that is a good thing or a bad thing for your company culture. This is one that's near and dear to my heart because I can enforce the culture that we would like to have as an organization. The last part of that question was why you chose it. So even if they come up and say, I read this fiction book, this story book, whatever it might have been, a great answer around why they chose it is very helpful, right? If they chose it because, well, it's fiction, but it was highly recommended. It was recommended by somebody they trust. I chose it because I've been reading that entire trilogy or series. All of those are good answers. And then you may get other, answers around, they didn't really chose it. It was, required reading of them. But either way, all of this culminates into finding people and adding at least one more culture question that we can ask to ensure that people match our company culture and what's important to us. So I leave you with this. Think of what exhibits your company culture and what kind of question you can ask to make sure that you're getting people on the team that are the perfect fit for you.
Thank you for tuning in to today's episode of the Epic Company Culture Podcast with Josh Sweeney. If you enjoyed this content, please subscribe on iTunes, SoundCloud, or Stitcher. For additional content and transcripts, visit epicculture.co. If you have questions or topics you would like us to address or expand on, tweet us at epicculture1 or email at podcast@epicculture.co.